This is Motivation. I'm Lori Joy Kingwell.
And I'm Chrissy Van. We're two dreamers on two wheels inspired by our community.
And we're celebrating the voices we're just lucky enough to discover along the ride.
You know, if my bike broke down, Lori, the first thing I would do is call for help because admittedly, I'm highly incapable mechanically of doing anything to my bike. And I'm not saying that as a weakness. It's a fact. I've invested no time to learn, and I'm truthfully really happy to support my friend Rochelle of True Grit Moto when things break down. But I do not hesitate to make that phone call because I don't have the know-how and I want to get back on the road. Yet me being the same person in life, whether it's an emotional turmoil or upset that's going on in my life, or sometimes even a logistical business thing that isn't going well in my professional life, there's a hesitation there. I don't make the call right away. I get this urge to be hyper independent, and I all of a sudden end up under this mirage that it's a weakness if I call out that lifeline. And I still do this. So as much as we're entering this conversation, this is something I'm actively working on shedding from myself. And that is, if you're removing something, you have to invite something into your life. And what's the thing that you need to invite when we need to pull on that lifeline for help? Vulnerability. It's what it comes down to. It's what connects us as humans. When things go wrong in life, there's a really famous quote, look for the helpers. And the helpers generally are always there. And we know that it's our mission in life, really, when you drill it down, is to be there for our communities. Where do we get the most joy or the most zest from life? Often when we've helped another. And I don't mean necessarily a grand gesture of rescuing somebody from a burning building, but the proverbial burning buildings of life could quite literally be a smolder that somebody's struggling with. And what happens when we don't reach out for those lifelines? Well, we tend to continue to double down with anxiety. And we start to have that culminate within our being because we start to get so overwhelmed by whatever pressures we're putting on ourselves to deal with this solo. Meanwhile, we share a planet with billions of people, and generally we're surrounded by communities that would be so happy to help. But why is it so hard to actually say the words? And I think to a large degree, it's because we often get misguided that it is a weakness. I am saying I cannot. Does that mean I lose value in this social currency of life? Does it mean that there's a change of power? What is power? Why do we feel like we need to possess it and put ourselves on a pedestal where, quite honestly, so many in these cases, when you don't do it, you either stall in place, just circling in a spin of anxiety, or you don't necessarily get the juice, which I know is a reference we love to use here, to squeeze out of the situation that you possibly could when you are being lifted up by others. So I know we can come at this conversation, Lori, in so many different angles, because I think just asking the words, I need help, I need guidance, I need support, really is rooted to us as people that battle with vulnerability. And so it's kind of taking a magnifying glass to that situation, because you and I both know that the minute that you do say those words, my God, people want to show up when you tell them. And the change that can happen on the other side of that, or the things that you can create, or the conversations you can have, or the emotions you can work through by joining forces with those connections, can completely alter the course of your life in regards to paths of success or paths of working through emotions. And I think it's a tool that often is underutilized. We live, I mean, you and I are in a city where we're in boxes. In my building alone, there's 124 lives and units happening around me at the same time. I don't know behind every door what struggles lie. And it's because we kind of have this same mentality in our brains that we're in these boxed silos, and we forget. We just got to open the door and say, hey, hello there, friend.
Right. I'm in desperate need.
In desperate need. Please send me some sugar.
Right. This is an absolute, it's a very uncomfortable feeling when you have these parts of ourselves that you just feel like, oh, what I'm doing isn't enough, or I don't have a capacity. And when we're thinking of it in that way of like, I have a lack of capacity, it then kind of rolls into I'm not enough. or I'm incapable, or I'm not what I thought I was, or people might not respect me in the same way if they see this flaw, or if they see this weakness, vulnerability, which again, every single one of us has a weakness, just like every single one of us has strengths. I shouldn't say weakness, nesses. We have weaknesses. But so much about, life for so long was about like only showing the cards of your strengths, because that's what accumulated respect for you as a person. And so if you had to be exposed for your weaknesses, then, people would see you differently and less than. And it's just not the truth, because a lot of times, and you see it, sometimes you see it a bit like taken advantage of online sort of thing, where everyone's just like, these are all my weaknesses, almost to get attention.
Yes.
But one of the reasons that's become such a thing is because people started to put their weaknesses and their vulnerabilities out there, and just to say like, this is actually how I feel. This is actually parts of myself as well. And there was such a gravitational pull from everybody when those moments do happen, vulnerability, because it makes everybody else feel safer within theirs as well. It makes you feel less alone, because I really think if you really dug to the deepest parts of it, it's feeling as though if I'm not enough, then I'm on the out. And if I'm on the out, I may not survive. And that's part of our like caveman brain, because you didn't if you were on the out way back when. And so there's so much about, are you capable so you can fit in, so you can continue, or so that like you are who you think you are. Mm-hmm. And every one of us is this rounded human, which involves all of the different contrasts. And when you invite and befriend and again, I'd like to stay, not even again, I haven't said this out loud. This is also not my strength. I'm working on it the same ways we together in a lot of ways with this podcast and everything are working on this part, because I was the same. I rarely asked for help. I rarely shared, especially if I was in an emotional state, or I go inwards. I actually want to disappear and go to my own little space, because that's how I learned very young that was the best way to do things for myself. But we want to be alone with those parts of ourselves and hide them until we can fix them, so that they're never exposed. And what also happens is, in that loneliness with it, we feel more alone in it. And like you said, the anxiety heightens, and the feelings of less than, and all the other things that come with it. And then we also look around for that kind of confirmation bias, because no one else is noticing that you're in this tumultuous space, or this like lost space, or all these different things. Then we look at those other people as like, they don't care about me, or they don't really see me, or all the storylines that we create around the lonely feeling that we have. And then not only do we feel first and foremost that we don't want to reach out because of our own thing, now we don't want to reach out because we've created to an extent that they're the asshole, or they're the selfish, or I've been there in these moments. And part of it, a big part of it, is asking yourself like, oof, what's making me feel less than right now, of whatever skill set it is, or whatever feeling it is, and being kind of clear enough with yourself to say, what's one step that I could take? Who's out there in my life? A friend, because as adults, we've cultivated relationships. There's a reason you have invited the people that are in your life into your life. And they're right there to utilize, so that this feeling of aloneness, and this feeling of like not good enough, or this part that's not your strength or skill, there's very likely these people in your world, because usually we also cultivate people that are on the other side of the spectrum in us from other different parts of our personalities. So likely there's their strength. And then like you said, that makes people feel good, because they get to utilize their strength. And it's a serotonin hit for us to help one another. And so not only is it allow there to be the like, it's okay, this is a great thing. So rather than it being a deficit on your behalf, it's like, hey, this weakness of mine, I'm going to offer it up as a gift to this, like it is what it is. And also I can learn something, and maybe it's a little less of a weakness moving forward, because I'm going to learn something from the person that this is a strength. I also allow that person to utilize their strength, get the serotonin hit from helping. I feel less alone. And it's this connective experience, but it's so very hard because we are trapped in viewing it as a weakness, a deficit, something that we should stay alone with because it's easier than the expression of vulnerability.
Well, and it's like that admitting to self, like maybe I don't got it. And then realizing that's very much okay. Right. And I know so much of it stems from ego as well. And this is the thing. I think sometimes, like, when we speak of ego, we almost feel as though if we're doing any self work, we should be absolved from it ruling any of our being. Whereas,
God,
like,
that
your
doesn't
ego's
exist.
coming along for the fucking ride, no matter
Whether you
what.
like it or
Right.
not.
Yeah. It's
Yeah.
a daily battle. And so much of it can come like your ego almost can't, it feels a bit too fragile to admit even to itself. And that's the part you really have to break up with. And that, quite honestly, can be from an emotional standpoint when you're going through something really tough. You don't want to admit that you're not strong enough. It's almost one of those things. It's a pet peeve of mine, and I've written it a million times too, but I'm more thoughtful about it. When somebody shares something, and often they do end up sharing it on social media, which have your thoughts of how you feel about that. But let's say there's something going wrong in their life and everyone's like, stay strong, stay strong. And I'm just like, there's merit to it. But also I'm like, you know what? It's okay to not always be strong 100% of the time. Like, live the things and move through the things and get your people to get through the things. And, we were just on a camping trip where I know Lori went up ahead of time with a girlfriend of ours, and she was going through a difficult time. And the thing that I thought was so beautiful about that story, there was instant vulnerability within what you all created in story sharing that first night that she was there. And because of that, she was given this safe space to feel the feels on this solo venture. And it was her willingness to be open.
Oh, we got to back up a little bit because the way you described it, it sounded like that you were saying the friend I went up with.
Oh yeah, no, sorry.
No, yeah, because I was like, did they? And I was like, there was another element, and then I'm like, oh, you are talking about the other one. So just a little context was, as me and my girlfriend were setting up camp for the rest of the crew to come up a little bit later, so just two of us there at the time, this gal comes up and she is asking about the campsite. She's the same age as us. So she comes up and says, is there a parking lot close by? Yeah, you're setting up camp. Yeah, are there good ones? Yeah, here's a couple cute ones. And I asked her, how many people are you traveling with? She said, just myself. I was like, oh, very cool. She's like, yeah, I was supposed to come up with my boyfriend and we just recently broke up. And so she had come from Penticton and then decided, I'm still doing this trip, even though, like her heart was absolutely thrashed with this breakup. She's like, I've never camped by myself. I've never been here before. I am broken up with. My heart is hurting. But I am here. And I was like, wow. And she immediately, and we were both like, wow, that's incredible. I'm so sorry to hear that as well. And, big tears came. We gave her a big old hug and we were just like, and she set up camp just down from us. And so this is a story. So she became kind of threaded into our weekend of us actually, her still doing her own thing. She came up there in a mountain bike, but her being really open and us really supporting her through this tough weekend. So not only was she still doing it solo, but then she had this like little safety emotional net from these complete strangers that were us by just being vulnerable enough to share just like where she was at in that moment.
Oh, and I had so much appreciation for her to be able to do it. And when I kind of reflected on it when we got back, and you're like, that's not easy to necessarily show up and share in that capacity. But when I think of, and she even wrote to the impact that it had on herself through that weekend, and it added to our weekend as well, because we kind of know what we have within our community. And I think it is because so many of us are breaking open levels of vulnerability. Truthfully, I almost think of it as like cracking a hard-boiled egg kind of thing for myself. And slowly but surely, eventually we'll get to the yolk. But it's this community that has really given me a lot of the tools to start smashing it against the pot and have these pieces start to fall open. And the only way that you're going to get cracking is by giving yourself the opportunity to put yourself in those uncomfortable, vulnerable places. Because I think what we speak to anytime there's moments of growth, it's uncomfortable. Like I hate it less. I definitely hate it less, but like being vulnerable for me is very uncomfortable. And I don't know if that will ever go away, but what I do know is the more that I allow space for that, I'm able to feel deeper than I was before. There's parts of myself that I'm unlearning, that there's parts of myself I didn't know that I had access to. You know, I spoke, I think, on the podcast coming back from Belize, which I feel took a large piece of my shell off me. We did this amazing 8-day ride, riding through this incredible countryside and jungles and the memories that were created. But more on top of anything we witnessed that trip, there was this beautiful energy that you were surrounded by, where every single moment you showed up, I knew that everyone that was there will take you at the face value of that moment. And I think that a lot more humans are willing to do that than we think. It's almost like we're so used to social media giving us this filtered perception of what life is that we forget that there is a lot of realness behind all those proverbial doors that I spoke of in our boxy condo business.
Mm-hmm.
But if you don't attune yourself to that, then you're going to miss it. And the thing is, life is hard. Like, one thing, I went back home to Ontario and I sat with my godparents who are like late 60s at this point, and they were like, stress will always exist and you're never going to feel like an adult kind of thing. But like the sways of life in some realm are always going to exist. You're never, we always think in our minds, when I just get through this, when I just get through this, when I finish this project, when I pass this date, it's always going to be something. And hopefully, because if everything was just beautiful and streamlined, then we wouldn't really need to concern ourselves in life, you know, like you wouldn't even recognize when the good times were good, but it's always going to exist. But again, when I say there's billions of people on the planet, why would we spend the time in trying to do it by ourselves? Because we want to feel powerful. I can tell you, when you're in the thick of it and you know you need help and you're not reaching out, the last thing you feel like is powerful anyways. Mm-hmm. You know, you're not empowered. Mm-hmm. It's like you're struggling.
Yeah. Here's the other thing too, is a lot of times the people that are the quickest to help are the ones that find it the hardest to ask for it. Because it's that there's a lot of ego. If you really dig and look, there's a lot of ego in that a bit, because there's a little bit of a saviorism complex, or I have all of these strengths that I can not only carry myself, but I can carry you as well. And yeah, that might be your strength, that you have a bigger capacity to take on helping people. But when you aren't aware that the thing that is your strength, you're actually holding it as well as the weakness, because you're like, well, why would I need to ask for help if this is my strength? Mm-hmm. Being the fixer, being the person that has these tools, because then I might look like a fraud, or I might look like that wasn't, you know, I'm not the person to go to, because if I was, then why would I need the help in this? And it's not. It's that thing of like, that is what makes it more fraudulent. Because if you're coming and saying, thank you for asking help, I'm glad you reached out, or saying to that person, please know that you can always come to me for help, but then you're that same person that is unwilling, then you're like, then you are really missing the meaning. Mm-hmm. You are really missing the depth, or or there's so many more layers that you really need to unfold to really experience the capacity that helping and giving really is about. Because it has so much more to do with your ego and how you're identifying and confirmation that this is who you are. If you're doing, because, you know, if you're not able to be on the other side of it, because
well, and it's a lot of, if I'm not this, who am I? If I'm not this,
who am I? Yeah. I have a good friend that's like super, 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 super generous, but like, you could be like, do you want to borrow my pen? And he'd be like, I'm fine. I'll find one eventually. Well, you need it right now. Are you sure you don't just want to borrow my pen? Like almost to that. No, I'm good. I'm good. Because, but I
And it's
could say
probably
like, can I have
learned.
your house? And they'd be like, sure.
1,000. And like, I'm sure,
It is.
you
It's
spoke to like
100% learned.
childhood kind of thing.
Yes.
And like, that's like myself where I'm
That's
like,
where it
I got it.
begins.
I got it. I don't need it. Even when we were coming down the hill to go to camping and it's steep and my butt's still unhappy, like for me to be like, yes, please take the wagon. That's not easy for me to do. I'm like, I'll carry the wagon and all the wagons. Like, you know what I
Yeah.
mean?
Yeah.
That quite literally in my inner narrative is the first thing I want to say. No, I don't need you. I got it. But I don't got it. So
and also why?
Like at what cost?
Yeah.
Why?
And you're like, okay, take up all the wagons, but now you got a strained shoulder and now you got it. And someone's down there just like waiting to be useful. And it's like, man, could use a little exercise on the bottom half. And here you are
100%.
pulling and hemorrhaging and, like
And that's
an extreme example, but you know what I'm saying, where you're like,
1,000%.
we're
And
just
like, I'm the
not
first to admit
communicating.
that about myself.
Yeah.
And like,
I'm with you. I'm here. I'm on the
right?
same
Because
boat.
everything in you wants to be like, no, I got it figured out. And you're like, it is so okay. And like, this is where, before we entered this conversation, we're like, how do we want to approach this? Because there's so many different facets in life, as we say, from professional versions of ourselves to emotional versions of ourselves. But I think the reactions, and again, it tied to vulnerability, it all goes back to the same thing. And one thing I've found really useful for myself is actually communicating how I can utilize help, if that makes sense. So like being really clear about how somebody can help me. Like in that instance, yes, it would be, and it's so basic that almost it's beneficial that the example is basic, but like, yes, you pulling the wagon is the helpful move for me. Because the thing is, a lot of times when you want to be a helper, or people's first reaction when things aren't going right or you need assistance, hey, let me know if you need any help with anything, right? First of all, on that side, we can almost reframe the question of like, what do you need? Mm-hmm. What do you need? Something as simple as that, because I know on the flip side, if somebody's like, let me know if I can help you with anything, the first thing I'm going to say is, oh, I'm fine. I may not be fine. But if somebody was like, what do you need?
Knowing the question,
then it's my job to communicate and come back and be like, actually, I need da 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 da. And if you're trying to be the helper and it's very clear of how you can help, it's better for everybody. Like it truly does come down to communication on both sides to make it work.
Yeah. I think that's it, is like, it's to help get clear on like, where do you need support? Where are you feeling at a loss? And get clear about that as well for yourself, so that you can be more clear, if possible, with the people that do need or are offering or are willing, which is most people, sort of thing. And also that also helps you to recognize of like, who is that person? Because if you're more clear of the need you need met or help with, you can get more clear of like, oh, it's that friend or this family member or that cousin, because that's their strength. They have that information on the ready, because a lot of times it has to do with, I hate to bother people. I hate to, everyone's got such, so much on their plate already in their busy lives. It's not this heavy weight of a burden. If it's something that takes them 2 minutes, but it would take me 18 hours to figure out and do, they can, and that's more of just the, like, I guess if it's a quick fix kind of something in that regard. But still, if you're just like, hey, I need more support, I'm going through a really rough time, and say I need a sleepover to have like quality time with my friend to like walk through some things or whatever, like a real night. Who is that friend that's like, I got you, I'm coming for the sleepover? Like, I'm that person. The amount of sleepovers as an adult that I've done, like, remember Rochelle was like, I barely knew you. Yeah. You came over and slept in my bed with me because she was having an exceptionally difficult time. And I said that to her. This might sound like you might be like, well, I'm not going to ask this like new friend to come stay over, but I'm like, I have a bag. I had a supper with completely different friends that night. I said, you need to know I'm packing a bag. It's in my car. My supper goes till about 10. As soon as that's done, I will call you. And I called her at 10 at night. And she was like, I think I do need someone to come stay with me. I said, you got it. I'm going to drop Dave at home. I already have my bag packed. So I also took extra steps. So, because I knew that was going to be a hard ask for a person, especially someone that wasn't close. So also there's a thing on the other side of like, if that is your strength, how can you also make it easier on friendships and people in your life where you can to make that ask easier? So how can you, so there is that. And sometimes I wish that some of my friends, you guys are quite strong in this. But in my past, I should say, I wish my friends had those skill sets to seek a little bit more and have a little bit more awareness of where they could help with the thing, or where I had communicated a need and I didn't necessarily walk them through specifics, but I let them know that like tough times were happening and that there wasn't necessarily the clear help, or that was like, oh, I can come. And then you were like, that'd be great. I need someone now. And they were like, I can come in a month. And you were like, yeah. Thanks so much. But how, don't tell me that you're going to drop everything and come. And then I'm like, I need you to drop everything and come. And then you're like, pretty busy until November 4th. And you're like, that helps me none. I love you, but that helps me none. And sometimes too, that's what makes some of us go back into our shell around things.
True.
Because when you do go vulnerable, so also be very conscious that you're not just throwing out that thing that feel good. And that's what I would very much say, because I've had a lot of that in my life where people say the thing that makes them feel good. You need anything, let me know. If you need me, I am there. I will drop everything, blah, 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 blah. Because when I say that, I don't fuck around. I drop everything because I mean it when I say it. So when someone says that to me, I'm thinking they actually mean it. And these are wonderful people. These are good people. But all I'm saying is that also be cognizant that when you're saying something, you're not just doing the served up platter of support and help. Be conscientious of offering up what you're capable of. And if you get asked and someone does need you, it's going to be also maybe a little, it's not always the feel good feeling of getting to help. Sometimes you have to first do things that you have to sacrifice some of your comfortability to get there to help them. But that is part of relationships too, because that is where it makes it hard for us to trust that as people, not you and me. Well, yes, you and me, but people, is because, and that's where those things happen in childhood, is where you didn't have needs that were met in those moments. And so it became easier to protect yourself and just do it yourself than it did to be vulnerable, because we don't start off that way. It ends up being something that's not only conditioned by the outside world, but it's also something that we learn through the outcome of being, I don't want to say neglected. Sometimes it is neglect, but you know what I'm saying? And so that's the other thing. As a person, be very mindful what you're offering up in your support, because it does land very, very heavily when someone is vulnerable and is thinking this person's going to catch me. They said I'm here for the trust fall, go for it. And then they hit the ground. That's it. That feels, and you're already feeling very, very down with what's happening, that you've asked for help, and then you hit the ground. That's a tough one, man. That's a tough one.
Well, and I think that you bring up a really good point before we get to motivation maintenance time here, and we went through a situation that we talked about on the podcast. It's okay as well. And it comes down to communication, to say when you maybe aren't that right person in that moment. Because sometimes it happens, somebody you love near and dear, and you're both in the thick of it at the same time. And you just know when you speak to capacity that you don't have the capacity to make the offer, but like communicate that to the person you love as well.
Yeah.
I see that you're going through a really difficult time, and I want to be there for you. And I know that I'm not showing up in the way that you need right now.
Yes.
And like, putting that out there and being very clear can very quickly remedy that feeling of like, holy fuck, you just let me fall with no explanation. Like if you are able to at least communicate that to the person, no one's not going to understand. Like, and to be honest, for a human being in that moment and that conversational exchange, at least you were heard. You are being heard. You are being seen. You are being understood. Like, oh, thank goodness, this person that loves me at least sees that I'm drowning over here, but I can see they're also in the pool splashing in the deep end. So maybe they're not the best person to save me right now.
That's such a good comment to make. We remember the clothes for business we talked about.
It's one of my favorite things. I've taken that nugget with me.
Yeah. And and when we make that reference in another episode, we talked about when you're in it and you're just like nose above water and other people are nose above water in your life and they're coming to you, it is not only okay, but I believe it to be imperative that you let them know, I love you. I see you. I'm closed for business. I do not have a capacity. I have nothing to give. I'm going to fill my bucket. And once I'm at a different space, I got you
1,000%.
Wherever you're at. But like, I have to, if I try and catch you or swim with you, I will drown and you will drown. And so it's first and foremost that, as well as just like you said, in a slightly different context of if you think that you can be there and then it turns out their ask is something that you just can't do, you convey that. Because what I have had is that, and obviously that's come up in a big way with our family members passing and trying to find the happy medium between like, what am I going to just process on my own and what do I need help with? And I've had the context that I was just talking about is the friend that's like, hey, you need anything, I'm there. I drop it all. Just say the word. And then I said the word, I do actually need you. And they were like, ooh, pretty busy until a month from now. And I was just like, okay, all right. And versus somebody that was like, hey, when you do this, I will be there. And then I was like, okay, I'm doing that thing. Can you be there? And they were so open and honest. And they were like, I have this going on and I want to, and it's important to me. And I know it's important to you. And I want to be there in the way that you need me. I just can't. And this is why. That felt so different.
Yes.
Because it was like, there was clarity. They were still fully there in that moment of like, what was the weight of it?
They understand the gravity.
And whereas the other friend, beautiful human, just the same again, but the level at which they were able to take in the gravity and the context of the situation was very different. And that's why I say, if you're not in a place where, and that's why I say that other relationship says things like, I'll be there, I'll do those things. And they think they mean it, but they don't yet in life understand the gravity of what that means. Because the proof is in the actionable moments versus other people. And sometimes that just comes down to lived life experience. Mm-hmm. You can't know what you don't know. And that's the only reason why. And I'm sure I've done that in my own context that I'm unaware of at the gravity of which it's happened. Like, none of us are immune to this.
None of us, absolutely.
That's why I say one of the best ways that I have found in my life or other people is that asking yourself, how much am I just saying this? And how much do I mean this? Because if I don't actually like, and what does that mean? Because we say these really like throwaway, but they mean something in that moment because it feels like the right thing to say. Don't say the thing that feels right to say. Say the thing that you mean to say.
1,000%. I think we should launch right into our
motivation. My dog gets so mad when I sing.
Yeah. Stella's just snoring underneath me.
There you go. Marley was sleeping and then he's like, oh God, emergency. He immediately whines and whimpers.
Stella's really exhausted from her 2-second trip outdoors in the heat. It's like she's just not down for this. So.
Big day for Stella.
Yeah, big day, big nap. So we know I'm a journaler, and it might seem counterintuitive to say, hey, reach out to people and then tell you to write your thoughts to yourself. But I have a reason. So in my work life, I'm in charge of my own schedule, which sounds awesome. And it is to a degree, but at the same time, you have to have frameworks in your life to actually be productive, especially if you're a creative mindset like me. So every day when I get up, my routine, and I basically started initiating this in the spring once I had a clearer picture of what my executions were to be. And I always kind of map out my day and I write the top 3 things that I need to tackle that are like most important. And I write them in order of importance. And that's basic. And then anything else that I know that I should be putting into my day kind of goes in smaller font underneath. And I quite literally give myself the satisfaction of crossing each one of those off as I go. And it helps me stay focused. It helps make sure that I'm on point. I share this because I feel like when it comes to expressing our vulnerabilities and gaining clarity, you can kind of do the exact same thing with those moments in your life when you're feeling overwhelmed, whether emotionally, professionally, etc. Get your thoughts down of what do I need? Write down. For me, it's normally a lofty, like, this is what I'm going through and and very descriptive, but I get that out on paper so that I, for me, like to have it to reflect on later, because there's nothing more satisfying when you move through a tough time and you're able to see how you shifted through, what's changed, what you've learned about yourself. But get clear about what you need. Write those 3 points down of like, in this situation, how can I be helped? And that way you're going to be a way better communicator to reach out and be vulnerable and let people know, this is what I need right now. This is what I need. Maybe in that moment, if it's an emotional one, like I could really benefit going for a walk with a friend, and then take the time to actually reach out, set that up, go for the walk, give yourself the satisfaction of crossing it off, reflecting on how you feel in the after. But getting really clear is quite helpful, because often in times of overwhelm, if your brain is overwhelmed already, it's almost like having static in both your ears. It becomes a lot more difficult to think clearly when we feel like that, because you have thoughts bombarding a mile a minute, things you don't have completed. Your brain's trying to connect the dots of, I got to do this. I got to do this. I want to feel this. And the chatter gets so excessive that I find just getting it out onto paper, for me, that's one of the most valuable tools I have.
Yeah. One thing that I find helpful is when I am so whenever I'm in a kind of dysregulated state, essentially, of like, I feel a bit confused of what's the next right step, or I'm feeling emotionally vulnerable, or whatever it is, I have a hard time seeing clearly. We all do, right? You're not overly in your prefrontal cortex. So the point of it is that when I'm in a more clear state, I do have like friends, that all my kind of friends written down, and I have like their strengths written down, essentially. So when I'm in a thing of like, well, I need to laugh, I need this, I need to just hear someone, I need to, walk, I kind of will go to like, well, who's that? I don't have it necessarily on me anymore, but it's more, I wrote it down a way back, and then it just kind of sits in my brain, because that helps me, rather than what would happen is I kind of blank. I'm like, well, who do I want? I don't know. They've got, and I would focus more on like, well, what's their strength? Well, their strength, I always feel better after, like Chrissy and I are the walk and talks. We always feel better after we go on our walk and talks. You know what I mean? Like there's,
I guess Chelsea, they're okay.
I guess they're not bad. Like I've got, my certain friends that are like phone conversations. I can, like one of my good girlfriends from back home, Jill, she's magic on the phone. And there's other friends that are in-person friends, and I'm just like, what do I need and where can I be that I can have that? Or their strength is like work stuff, if it comes to work stuff, But anyways, it helps me get really clear without having to overly think of like, who should I call? I just kind of, I'm like, okay, where the journaling thing, it works with that of like, what do I need? Okay, well, whose strength is that? Or who am I most accessible to right now to call? Do I have time for a walk, or do I have time for more of a phone call? Is this like, what is that moment in time? And like, and sometimes, it's like, well, Chrissy, you're pretty well-rounded. You could do any of them, but you know what I'm saying? It's just like, have just a bit of clarity.
I am pretty great. Good thing I have no ego.
I'm pretty top of the charts.
I mean, simply the best, better than all the rest. But can you imagine? Right. I'm highly flawed, everybody. That's why we've had a podcast running this.
Yeah, we have no shame in our game. Yeah. We are pretty open about all of it. Listen to an off-road, you'll hear it all.
Right.
But yeah, just like getting more clear on that. And the only other thing I'd add to that is just on the flip side of things, I would just start to just make a little reflection for you as the person that's on the other side of being a support system for any and everybody, because everybody's going to be it at some point. And if you're not in any capacity, I think you need to really look at that, because you're living very selfishly, and very only your needs are important and need to be met. And you're not actually taking consideration of other people's experiences. So if you're just like, I'm not really the person that ever gets come to, that's something you should check into, not in a guilt way, shame way, but like
you're missing out as well, because again, it is about that connection, right? through that, it is a more selfish state, but also you're robbing yourself of something in that same breath.
Yeah, absolutely. But start just reflecting of like, do you only show the support that you think that they need? Do you only show the support that, you say the thing, but they never really follow up on it with you? Or, like how much does that feel like it's a real actionable thing that you take around the words that you say? It's like the performative support. Yeah. And because it's easy to say like, like I'm doing the anti-racism work, I put up a thing online. It's kind of like that shit. And you're like, that took 2 seconds and you said it to make you feel good.
You did it so that you could use a trending hashtag.
Yeah. It was about feeling good. And it was about being like, I am doing good things. I am a good person. And you're like, well, you're missing the whole point because that's not what it is all about. Actually, if you're doing the thing, you'd feel like not so good inside because you'd be looking at the shit.
Yeah.
And so that's a bit of it too, is like, it's stepping. And I think that's why people avoid it too, because it's like, oh, once you're actually stepping into the hard stuff, you feel good helping, but you're also stepping into a very sad place with that person or very challenging. And that doesn't feel so good. And so that's where it's, again, just a little reflective work I would highly suggest to do as a person, to recognize of like, how can you take being there for other people to the next level? Where are you creating more of a barrier by not looking directly at certain parts of yourself as showing up for other people? Because that is, I think, a big thing that I've noticed throughout my life is like, it feels good to say, but the uncomfortable work of actually showing up and and all the kind of intricacies of that, it's like they want to just skip over that part and being like, I did the good friend thing. And you're like, well, if you phoned it in, you did a college try and you phoned it in. Yeah, that's different, dude. That's different.
And just remember, we're all a work in progress.
Hell
and
yeah.
When it comes to our quote today, I'm going to do my own, which in the world today, let's face it, somebody else I'm sure has said this, and that's what I'm regurgitating. But when it comes to life, the only way through it is through it. Just remember, you don't have to do it alone.
That's great. Chrissy Van, quoted by Chrissy Van. All right. I'm going to put it to a mountain backdrop and get it online for you, Chrissy.
Amazing. I love a mountain backdrop quote.
It's because I'm seeing a mountain backdrop quote for mine right now. So mine's by Les Brown, who I love him. Ask for help, not because you are weak, but because you want to remain strong.
Yes. And that is
your motivation.
I'll send. I hope you have a beautiful day.
I will.
And if you need anything, just know I absolutely have no interest in helping you in your life.
And that is your motivation.
You've just listened to the Motivation Podcast with your hosts, Chrissy Van and me, Lori Joy Kingwell.
And thanks for joining us along the ride. We've got new episodes dropping every Monday, and we're all about community. So follow us on Instagram at Motivation Podcast and visit our website at themotivation.com.
And remember, tanks full throttle.